Good afternoon. Let's get started with the exam 2, where we got the opportunity to do an interview with someone that we know. For this exam, I chose to interview my roommate. His name is Jacob. The reason that I chose to interview Jacob is simply that Jacob and I are very similar in the way that we consume, as well as our ideology and the things that we believe in. And so for that reason, I wanted to interview him because I had a sort of an insight from myself on how he might answer, and that kind of helped me with some of the questions. We've built pretty good trust between the two of us. We've known each other for many years. We've done a lot of things together. Sometimes it almost feels like we know each other better than we know ourselves, and that kind of allows us to call each other out when we're being dishonest or hiding the truth, if you will. And so that was another reason that I chose to interview Jacob. The three concepts that I used to kind of drive my interview were the concepts of how decisions are made. Do you think first? Do you feel first? Or do you act first? Then we talked about the 5 parts of decision making and how he uses those. And then finally, we talked about consumption based on enjoyment and the ideology and the things that you've done since you were a child or since birth that you're predisposed to. So first, I asked Jacob, I said, when you make consumer decisions, do you think first? Do you see how you feel first? Or do you act first? His immediate reaction was strictly in that order. He thinks first, and then he sees how he feels, and then he finally makes an action based on that. He uses this primarily for bigger purchases, and like one of the more recent ones we talked about was his dirt bike boots that he recently purchased. It's an expensive purchase. He wanted to be able to use those to go dirt biking with us. He felt like he needed it, and so he took the time to do a lot of research, looking into these dirt bike boots, seeing what would work best. He knew it would bring him enjoyment. That's how he felt about it, and then he made the decision to make that purchase. I did ask him how about for purchases that are not as expensive or not based on hobbies, such as being at the store and you can't pick between a generic item or a name brand item. He said in those situations he tends to think first, he cares a lot less about how he feels, and then he acts. So that's kind of an idea of how he makes those decisions. So next we moved on to the 5 parts of decision making. Because it was fresh in his mind, he went back to the dirt bike boots with that one. He identified a problem. The problem was that he did not have the proper equipment to safely dirt bike. So therefore he was missing out on some enjoyment of one of his favorite hobbies, his new favorite hobbies that I was able to get him into by selling him my old dirt bike. With that, he also did a lot of research. He looked into the best dirt bike boots in terms of value, cost, how effective they are at keeping your feet safe, and customer reviews and things like that. With that, he looked at many different boots and evaluated lots of different alternatives. With that, he was able to make an informed decision on what he felt was the best option for him. And the post-purchase evaluation, we were able to go for a dirt bike ride together, and he had a blast. He loves the boots, and he's excited to continue to use them. As I talked to him more about that, I told him, I said, there's no way that you'd be able to go through that whole process for every decision that you make. So I wanted to kind of narrow down what made him use that decision-making process to make the purchase. He said that he primarily uses this process when he's making purchases for his hobbies, because those things are so important to him, because it stems from enjoyment, and he wants to live a fulfilled life. He's willing to spend more money and put more time and effort into those things, whereas other decisions, like we mentioned, being at the store, they kind of get the reserves of what effort and time is left. Finally, we talked about consumption based on enjoyment and ideology. Jacob was born in Idaho just like I was. He grew up with his family mountain biking all the time. He loves vehicles. He has a 4Runner that he constantly is working on and improving, and he loves being in the outdoors. From a young age, because of where he was born and his family, he developed a love for these hobbies and built an ideology because of how he was raised. Because of this mindset, he's, like I mentioned before, he's much more willing to spend the money on the things that he enjoys, his hobbies, his passions, And then in his words, after he makes those decisions, whatever money he has left goes towards everything else, and it kind of just falls into what's left. This ultimately is based on the ideology of how he was raised and his preferences and the enjoyment that he gets as a result of that. This interview was able to give me an insight on his consumer decisions, and I was grateful to have that opportunity. Thank you.